In the middle of the Nevada desert, a humanitarian convoy vanished, no traces, no survivors, no answers. But when a former Marine and his loyal German shepherd follow the last signal, what they uncover isn't medicine. It's a secret experiment buried deep beneath the sands. Human lives trapped, truths erased, and one of the victims, his own brother, missing for 10 years. As the world watches lies collapse, one man must decide, will he expose the darkness or let it swallow him too? Because sometimes miracles aren't found in churches or heavens. They're found in the courage to fight for what's right. If you believe faith can still move mountains, don't scroll away. Hit subscribe, share, and comment Amen to help spread this story of hope, faith, and redemption. Thank you for watching, and may God bless everyone who still believes in miracles. The morning sun crawled slowly over the endless desert of Nevada, spilling a pale, coppery light over the cracked asphalt of Route 95. The air shimmered like molten glass, and the horizon seemed to tremble beneath the heat. Dust devils whirled lazily between stretches of dry brush and rusted mile markers. A vulture circled high above, its shadow cutting across the sand like a bad omen. Far off, in the silence of the dunes, a line of military-style transport trucks lay overturned, half buried in sand, their once white paint now dulled by wind and heat. By the time the local authorities arrived, the convoy had already been abandoned. No tracks, no bodies, no radio signal. Just the echo of engines swallowed by the desert wind. The news of the vanished Aid Front convoy spread quickly across the country. Aid Front was a globally recognized humanitarian organization known for its medical relief missions in disaster zones. Their logo, a white dove over a blue cross, had long been a symbol of compassion. But now, the disappearance of 5 trucks carrying critical medical supplies during a viral outbreak sparked outrage and panic. The government called it a logistical failure. The media called it a scandal. In a small town outside Ely, Nevada, Jack Miller sat in the shadow of a half-collapsed barn, his weathered hands tightening the screws on a small metallic device, a satellite tracker prototype he had designed years ago. Jack was a man in his late 40s, tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-baked skin and a face carved by time and regret. A faint scar ran along his jaw, a reminder of a shrapnel wound from Afghanistan. His steel-gray eyes, once sharp with purpose, now carried the weary calm of someone who had seen too much of both war and loss. His beard was rough but neatly trimmed, and his hair, streaked with early silver, stuck out from beneath a faded cap that bore the Marine emblem. By his side lay Rex, a 5-year-old German shepherd with thick sable fur and intelligent amber eyes. The dog's muscular frame spoke of training, discipline, and loyalty. He was Jack's shadow, his only companion since leaving active duty. Rex had once served as a K-9 in military rescue operations, a survivor of explosions, storms, and silence. The two understood each other without words. When Jack took a deep breath, Rex lifted his head as if reading his thoughts. That morning, Jack's solitude was interrupted by the low hum of an approaching vehicle. A dusty black SUV rolled into the clearing, stopping a few feet from the barn. A woman stepped out, Agent Sarah Jennings, mid-30s, with sharp posture and a quiet confidence that came from years in federal investigation. She wore a simple beige field jacket and dark jeans, her blonde hair pulled back into a neat ponytail, and her green eyes scanned the surroundings like a hawk's. Her voice, calm yet firm, broke the silence. Jack Miller. Jack didn't look up immediately. Depends on who's asking. Sarah Jennings, Federal Liaison for Aid Front, I was told you designed the tracking units we use for convoy logistics. We've lost contact with one of our humanitarian fleets." She paused, lowering her sunglasses. "We need your help." Jack finally met her gaze, his tone dry. "You mean the one that disappeared on Route 95, I heard?" Sarah nodded. "Your device was the only one on the fleet that used encrypted military coding. The others were standard civilian grade. The last ping came from a restricted zone, an area you might recognize." Jack's jaw tightened. "You're talking about the Black Ridge sector. That place should have been decommissioned years ago." "That's why we need you," Sarah said. "You know the terrain, and you know the tech. If someone tampered with your design, we need to find out how and why." Jack hesitated. The desert wind whistled between them. "I don't do government contracts anymore," he muttered. Sarah's expression softened slightly. "This isn't about contracts, Mr. Miller. People might be dying out there. We think the convoy was hijacked, but if your system was breached, it's more than theft. It's sabotage." Rex barked once, as if sensing the tension. Jack exhaled slowly, looking toward the horizon where the mountains cut sharp against the morning sky. He remembered his brother, David, who vanished a decade ago during a medical mission overseas, also under Aidfront's name. The memories came back like a ghost. A phone call that ended mid-sentence. A body never found. He finally stood up, brushed the dust from his jeans, and said quietly, "All right, Agent Jennings. I'll take a look. But I don't want your chain of command breathing down my neck." "You won't have to worry about that," she said. "This investigation's under the radar." They drove for hours through the endless stretch of desert highway. The asphalt shimmered, mirages dancing in the distance. Sarah briefed him on the situation. 5 trucks, 10 drivers, and 2 security escorts, all vanished within a 30-minute communication blackout. Satellite images showed nothing but empty road. The only clue was a faint electronic echo, a corrupted signal from one of Jack's prototypes. When they arrived at the last known GPS coordinate, the place was eerily silent. The desert stretched for miles with no sign of movement. The road was scarred by faint tire marks leading into a dried riverbed. One of the transport trucks lay half-sunken in the sand, its door hanging open, boxes of medical kits scattered like bones. Jack crouched beside the vehicle, examining the ground. "No signs of explosion, no struggle," he murmured. "Whoever did this knew how to make a clean extraction?" He brushed sand from a metal panel inside the truck and froze. "This isn't Aidfront issue." He tapped the edge of a hidden compartment, revealing a sleek device with military encryption seals. Sarah frowned. "What is that?" Jack's face darkened. "That's my old design, the Mark IV tracker. But this one's been modified." He connected it to his tablet, scrolling through lines of corrupted code. His expression grew tense. The signal wasn't jammed. It was rewritten. Someone rerouted the entire fleet's data stream before they vanished. "Rewritten by who?" Sarah asked. Jack's voice dropped. "Someone who knows my work. Someone inside." Rex's ears perked up, growling low at something in the distance. A glint of metal flashed briefly on the far ridge before vanishing behind the rocks. Jack squinted, his instincts kicking in. "We're being watched," he muttered. Sarah reached for her radio, but static filled the channel. "Signal's dead." Jack closed his tablet and stood. "Let's go. We're not alone out here." As they retreated toward the SUV, a gust of hot wind carried the smell of burnt rubber and something else, faint but unmistakable, blood. Jack's gaze hardened. Whatever happened to the aid front convoy, it wasn't an accident. It was an operation. And he had just stepped back into the war he thought he'd left behind. The sun sank low over the desert as they drove off, leaving behind the silent wreckage half buried in gold dust. Rex rested his head on Jack's lap, sensing his unease. The road stretched endlessly ahead, leading toward a truth neither of them was ready to face. The sun had already begun its slow descent when Jack steered the SUV off the highway and into a barren stretch of the Nevada wasteland. The air was heavy with heat, and the scent of scorched earth clung to everything. Dust rose behind them like a ghostly tail. Sarah sat beside him, scanning the digital map on her tablet. "The last signal from the aid front convoy came from here," she said, tapping the screen. "After that, nothing." Jack narrowed his eyes. This area was part of the old military test range, the kind of place where they buried things they didn't want found. Rex, resting in the back seat, perked up, his amber eyes tracking every movement through the window. They reached what looked like the skeleton of an abandoned checkpoint. 2 rusted gates half swallowed by sand, and a watchtower leaning as if it had given up long ago. Jack stepped out, the hot wind instantly whipping against his face. The desert hummed with silence, broken only by the ticking of the cooling engine. He crouched and examined the ground. The sand was disrupted. Tire tracks, deep and heavy, leading east. "They turned off the main road," he murmured. Sarah knelt beside him, sweat beading on her forehead. "Why here?" Jack didn't answer. He was already following the tracks. An hour later, as dusk began to settle, they spotted movement ahead, a lone figure standing near a collapsed communications pole. Jack tightened his grip on his pistol. "Stay in the car," he told Sarah, but Rex was already out, ears forward, muscles tense. The stranger raised her hands slowly, shouting over the wind, "Don't shoot! I'm not armed!" She stepped closer, and Jack saw a woman in her early 30s, tall and lean, with chestnut brown hair tied in a messy bun and sunburned cheeks that hinted at days spent in the field. Her khaki jacket was stained with dust and ink, and a camera hung around her neck. Her eyes, sharp, green-gray, observant, locked onto his with the intensity of someone used to chasing the truth. "Emily Carter," she said, extending her press ID. "Independent journalist. I've been following the aid front story for weeks. I guess you're here for the same reason." Sarah narrowed her gaze. "You shouldn't be here. This is a restricted area." Emily gave a half smile, fearless but weary. "Restricted areas are where the real stories hide." Jack studied her quietly. There was something about her, an unshakable resolve wrapped in exhaustion. "If you've been following this story," he said, "then you know what happened to the convoy." Emily nodded. "More than what they've told the public. Aid Front's official report says mechanical failure, but I found out one of their trucks was carrying classified medical cargo, something not meant for relief work." She opened her worn leather satchel and pulled out a crumpled photograph showing a row of metal containers, each marked with identical serial numbers. "These weren't on any public manifest. I think they were moving human test samples, or something worse." Sarah looked uneasy. "That's a serious accusation." Emily's voice dropped. "I don't make accusations, Agent Jennings. I verify facts, and my sources inside Aid Front have been disappearing." Rex barked softly, drawing everyone's attention to a mound of sand nearby. Jack walked toward it, brushing off layers of dust until a metallic clang echoed. Beneath the dune lay the corner of a shipping container, its surface scratched and scorched. Working together, they pried open the warped door, Inside was darkness and the unmistakable smell of decay and metal. Jack turned on his flashlight. The beam revealed chaos: overturned crates, shattered vials, and stacks of folders sealed in plastic. Each folder bore the aid front insignia and a label, Clinical Trial HN42. There were also photographs clipped inside: men and women with vacant stares, IV lines taped to their arms, and handwritten notes describing immunological mutations. Sarah covered her mouth. My God. Jack rifled through a pile of scattered papers until one sheet caught his eye: a printed list of test subjects. The names were coded, but at the bottom, one name was written in full: David Miller. The world seemed to tilt. Jack's fingers trembled slightly as he held the paper. This can't be right. Sarah looked over his shoulder. David Miller? Your brother? Jack nodded slowly, his voice rough. He volunteered for Aid Front after I retired from the Marines. He went missing in Uganda. They said it was an ambush. No remains, no evidence. But this... He held up the document. This says he was part of their experiments. Emily's expression softened. I'm sorry, Jack. I didn't know. Jack clenched his jaw, shoving the paper into his vest. His mind raced. They didn't lose that convoy, he muttered. They erased it. Rex growled again, this time louder, staring toward the horizon. Jack followed his gaze and saw faint lights flickering far away. Maybe headlights, or maybe reflections. We're not alone, he said. We need to move. As they packed up the documents, Emily insisted on coming with them. If I stay here, I'll vanish like the others, she said, her tone calm but final. Jack hesitated, then nodded. Fine, but stay close. They drove into the night, the headlights carving tunnels of light through the desert. Behind them, the wind began to cover their tracks. Jack's grip tightened on the steering wheel. He didn't say it aloud, but a storm was brewing. Not in the skies, but in his heart. Somewhere out there, his brother was still part of whatever Aid Front had become, and Jack swore he would uncover the truth, even if it meant walking straight into hell again. The desert stretched on, endless and cold beneath. The starlit void and the road ahead seemed to whisper a promise that every buried secret eventually finds its way to the surface. The storm rolled in from the west as dusk fell across the Nevada desert, painting the horizon in hues of violet and ash. The wind howled through the canyons of black rock, carrying with it the metallic tang of dust and decay. Jack drove the SUV along a narrow dirt path that wound between towering cliffs, his knuckles tight around the wheel. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating signs half buried in sand. Property of Aid Front, restricted access. Emily sat in the back, reviewing the encrypted files she had salvaged from the container, her brow furrowed in concentration. Rex lay beside her, his breathing steady but alert, tail flicking slightly whenever the road jolted. Sarah, riding shotgun, stared out the window, her expression unreadable. "You're sure this is it?" she asked. Jack nodded grimly. "Coordinates don't lie. This is where they wanted the world to stop looking." When they reached the canyon's dead end, the entrance appeared. An unmarked metal gate built into the cliffside, nearly invisible beneath years of sand and rust. Jack stepped out first, flashlight in hand. The air was unnaturally cold here, the kind of chill that didn't belong to the desert. "This place shouldn't exist," he muttered. Sarah drew her gun. "Then let's find out why it does." They pried the gate open and descended a sloped tunnel that reeked faintly of disinfectant and machine oil. Emergency lights flickered dimly, casting ghostly red glows along the steel walls. After several minutes, they entered a vast underground chamber, part hospital, part industrial nightmare. Rows of glass pods lined the room, each one filled with a colorless liquid. Inside floated human figures connected to wires and tubes, their faces pale and motionless. Emily raised her camera, voice trembling. God, they're still alive. She adjusted the focus and caught sight of a tag on one of the pods. Subject 12, failed neural sync. Another read, Subject 19, immunity collapse. Jack clenched his jaw. These aren't patients. They're experiments. The sound of footsteps echoed from the upper walkway, and Jack motioned for silence. A man appeared, a scientist in his 60s with thinning gray hair and thick glasses. His lab coat bore the aid front insignia. His movements were slow, almost mechanical, as if weighed down by years of guilt. Jack signaled for him to stop. "We're not here to hurt you," he said firmly. "We just want answers." The old man hesitated, then sighed heavily. "There are no answers left, only consequences." His voice carried the weary cadence of someone long trapped between duty and shame. "My name is Dr. Elias Monroe. I was the project director here. What you're looking at was meant to save lives." Emily stepped forward cautiously. "Save lives? You're torturing them." Dr. Monroe's eyes darted between the pods. "It began with hope. Aid Front was losing credibility. Funding was dying. Then Helix Bio, a biotech conglomerate, came to us with a proposal to merge humanitarian fieldwork with genetic research. We believed we could create a vaccine that would rewrite the immune system itself." His hands trembled. "We called it Project Helix, but something went wrong." Sarah frowned. "You used volunteers, didn't you?" Monroe nodded, his shoulders sinking. "They came willingly. We tested on terminal patients first, then field workers exposed to disease. The compound worked, at first. Then the mutations began. Their bodies healed faster than nature intended. But their minds, their memories." He trailed off, eyes glassy with regret. "They started to fade." Jack's voice was low, controlled. "One of them, David Miller. Where is he?" At the mention of the name, Monroe stiffened. "D17, he whispered. "He was our last surviving subject. The mutation stabilized in him, partially. He's still here, but—" Jack didn't wait. He stormed down the aisle, Rex at his heels, until he found the final pod at the far end. The tag read D17, stable, Moku. Observation. Inside floated a man with familiar features. Same jawline, same shape of eyes, though dulled by sedation. Jack pressed his hand to the glass. "David," he breathed. His voice broke for the first time. Emily lowered her camera. "We need to get him out." Monroe shook his head. "You can't. His life depends on that system. If you pull him out too fast, he'll die." Sarah turned to him sharply. "Then tell us how to stabilize him." Before Monroe could answer, alarms blared overhead. Red lights flashed violently as metal doors began to seal. "They know we're here," Monroe said, panic flickering in his eyes. "The internal network. Someone triggered a remote lock." Jack grabbed Monroe by the collar. "How many guards?" "2 security teams, private contractors, Helix Bio's own." Jack released him, scanning the exits. "Then we move fast." He looked at Emily. "Get every file you can. I'll handle power." He smashed the control panel with his elbow, causing sparks to burst as backup generators whined. The lights flickered again, revealing the full horror of the facility. Dozens of half-open pods, their contents now stirring as if waking from nightmare. Rex barked fiercely, snapping at the echo of footsteps drawing closer. Jack turned to Sarah and Emily. "Once we get David out, we shut this place down for good." The roar of engines above signaled reinforcements were coming. Jack looked back once more at his brother's face behind the glass and whispered, "Hold on, little brother. I'm taking you home." The underground facility shook with the echo of sirens and metallic groans as red lights pulsed like a heartbeat. Jack smashed the lock on the main laboratory door, the metal clanging against the floor. Emily rushed in beside him, her camera light slicing through the shadows. The room beyond was vast, sterile, cold, alive with machines that hissed and blinked. In the center stood the pod labeled D-17. David's still form floated inside, eyes closed, tubes winding around his chest like pale serpents. The sound of Rex's growl rumbled low behind them, his fur bristling, the dog's instincts already warning of danger. "Cut the main feed first," Jack ordered, scanning the control panel. His hands moved quickly, guided by years of mechanical precision. Sarah covered the doorway with her pistol, her green eyes sharp beneath the flickering lights. Sweat glistened on her forehead, but her voice remained calm. "We've got about 2 minutes before they're down here." Emily, determined but trembling, moved to assist Jack. "If we disconnect the neural interface gradually, he might stabilize," she said, remembering what Monroe had warned. Her voice was quiet but steady, the kind that carried conviction even when the world was collapsing around her. Jack's jaw tightened. "Do it," she typed in a rapid sequence of commands, and the pod began to drain. Steam hissed from vents as the liquid level dropped, revealing David's face. Pale, leaner than Jack remembered, with a faint scar near his temple. He looked younger, almost peaceful, though his chest rose and fell shallowly. "Come on, David. Stay with me," Jack whispered. His hand pressed against the glass, his eyes wet with years of guilt and hope colliding at once. Suddenly, a blast echoed through the hallway. The steel door buckled inward as armed men poured in. Black uniforms, visors, and the precision of trained killers. At their head walked Lucas Hayes, tall and imposing, in his mid-40s, built like a wall of muscle. His beard was trimmed short, his jaw square, eyes cold and calculating. A scar cut across his right eyebrow, the mark of a man who had survived too many wars. Once a respected private contractor, he had lost his family in a drone strike years ago and turned his grief into cruelty. Now, he was Aid Front's enforcer, a man who buried secrets for pay. "Step away from the pod," Hayes ordered, his voice deep and gravelly, echoing off the steel walls. "You shouldn't have come here, Miller." Jack turned slowly, his gun raised. "You think I'm walking away now?" Hayes smirked, stepping closer. "You're just like I was, a soldier looking for redemption. But here's the truth. There's no redemption in this line of work. Only clean exits." Before Jack could answer, Rex lunged forward as a shot rang out. The bullet grazed Jack's shoulder, and Rex collided with one of the guards, knocking him to the ground. Chaos erupted. Gunfire filled the air, ricocheting off metal and glass. Sarah took cover behind a console, firing back with controlled precision. Emily dove behind a crate, clutching her camera to her chest, still recording even as fear flashed in her eyes. Rex yelped as a second shot caught his hind leg, but the dog refused to fall. He dragged himself to his feet, teeth bared, protecting Jack as the veteran advanced through the smoke. Jack moved with the efficiency of a man who had seen too many battlefields, low, silent, relentless. He shot one guard, then another, until only Hayes remained. The two men circled each other amid the wreckage. Hayes reloaded slowly, sneering. You think this changes anything? The world runs on secrets. You expose one, another takes its place. Jack's gaze hardened. Maybe, but not today. He fired. The bullet struck Hayes in the shoulder, spinning him to the ground. The older man let out a harsh laugh even as he fell. You don't have the stomach to finish it, he growled. Jack hesitated, lowering his gun. No, but the law will. Sarah cuffed Hayes while Jack stumbled back toward the pod. Emily had managed to stabilize the controls. The glass lifted with a hiss. David collapsed into Jack's arms, limp but breathing. His skin was cold, his pulse faint but steady. Jack's voice broke. I've got you, brother. You're coming home. Rex limped closer, his muzzle resting against David's hand, whimpering softly. Emily, tears in her eyes, lifted her camera once more and began broadcasting the entire scene live through her encrypted feed. The footage of the underground lab, the pods, and the confrontation streamed across social networks within minutes, spreading like wildfire. As the emergency lights flickered, Jack glanced toward the broken glass pods and the faces of the lost souls trapped inside them. No more secrets, he murmured. Not on my watch. Outside, dawn's first light touched the Nevada horizon. Sarah's voice came through the radio. Extraction teams inbound. We're getting out of here. Jack looked down at his brother, still unconscious but alive, and whispered, M'se vena, lan nai an hua. His tears fell quietly onto the cold floor as Rex pressed closer, the faithful guardian who had once again stood between life and death. Morning light filtered through the blinds of St. Mary's Regional Hospital, washing the room in soft gold. The chaos of the past nights had quieted. Sirens no longer echoed, and the news outside spoke of justice instead of secrets. Jack Miller sat by the window, his arm bandaged, his face still bruised from the fight in the underground lab. He stared at the endless Nevada sky, clear, vast, forgiving. On the bed behind him lay David, pale but alive, his breathing even and slow. A faint smile tugged at Jack's lips. For the first time in years, he felt the war inside him settle. The door creaked open, and Emily Carter stepped in quietly, carrying a small bouquet of desert wildflowers, a mix of gold and white. She looked different now. Her hair, once tied in a messy bun, fell loosely over her shoulders, catching the sunlight. The exhaustion in her face was replaced by calm pride. Her freckles glowed softly under the morning light. You're early, Jack said without turning. I haven't slept, Emily admitted, placing the flowers in a small vase by the bed. Every network on the planet's running the story. Aidfront's board resigned overnight. The FBI's raiding their remaining offices. You and your brother, you did it. Jack let out a quiet laugh. No, we did it. He looked at her finally, his eyes softer than she'd ever seen. You exposed the truth. I just helped break a few doors. Rex, resting near David's bed, lifted his head and gave a low whine. His hind leg was wrapped in bandages, but his eyes were alert, tail thumping gently against the floor. The dog tilted his head as David stirred for the first time. Jack stood immediately, leaning over. Hey, easy there. You're safe now. David blinked, disoriented. He was thinner than before, his dark hair overgrown, and his face bore the marks of both suffering and survival. He turned his gaze toward Jack, confusion melting slowly into recognition. Jack? His voice cracked, dry from weeks of coma. Jack's eyes shimmered. Yeah, it's me, little brother. David's lips curved faintly. You never stopped looking. Jack chuckled through his tears. Not a chance. Rex moved closer, gently resting his muzzle on David's hand. The dog's ears flattened, eyes soft. David smiled weakly and whispered, "Hey, boy, you kept him safe, didn't you?" Rex wagged his tail once, as if understanding perfectly. Sarah entered then, dressed in civilian clothes for the first time. Dark jeans and a light gray jacket. Her blonde hair was tied back neatly, her green eyes clear of their usual steel. She carried a file in her hand and wore the faintest trace of a smile. "You two are officially cleared," she said. "No charges, no hearings. The Bureau's calling this a classified humanitarian recovery." Jack raised an eyebrow. "That's their way of saying they'd rather bury it quietly," Sarah shrugged. "Maybe. But the world already knows now, thanks to Emily." Emily smiled faintly but didn't respond. She moved to the window, watching the sunlight spill across the desert beyond. "I've been offered jobs from 3 major networks," she said, half amused. "All of them want the exclusive war journalist who took down Aid Front. But I think I've had enough of wars." Jack leaned back, crossing his arms. "So what'll you do?" She looked over her shoulder. "Find somewhere quiet. Maybe write again. Something with hope this time." Rex barked once, as if approving. Later that afternoon, David was transferred to recovery. The doctors were optimistic. Partial memory loss, but stable. Jack stayed with him the entire time, helping him sit up, helping him eat. It was slow, patient work, something Jack wasn't used to. "You're still the same," David said softly. "Always taking care of everyone else first." Jack smiled. "And you're still the stubborn one. Guess we didn't change that much." As evening approached, the 4 of them, Jack, Emily, David, and Rex, walked outside the hospital grounds. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly ahead, the same land that had nearly swallowed them whole. But now it looked different, alive again. The sun dipped low, setting the sky ablaze in gold and orange. Wind brushed gently across their faces, carrying the scent of sage and sand. David leaned on his brother's shoulder, taking each step carefully. Rex walked between them, his tail swaying lazily. Emily walked slightly behind, her camera slung around her neck but turned off. She didn't need to record anymore. The moment was already carved into memory. Jack stopped on a ridge overlooking the vast expanse. He took a deep breath and looked at the others. "You know," he said, "sometimes truth isn't about revenge. It's about healing." Emily nodded. "Then maybe this is where healing begins." As the final rays of sunlight spread over the land, the 4 of them stood together in silence. The desert wind carried the promise of peace, fragile, fleeting, but real. Jack glanced down at Rex, whose eyes shimmered with quiet loyalty. "Let's go home," he said softly. They began walking down the trail, their shadows long and golden, blending into the light of the coming dawn. Sometimes, miracles don't come with thunder or lightning. They come in quiet moments of courage, forgiveness, and love. Jack thought his war was over, yet God gave him one more battle, not to destroy, but to heal. He lost his faith once, but through pain, sacrifice, and the loyalty of a faithful friend, he found it again. Maybe that's what miracles really are. Not magic that changes the world in an instant, but the grace that changes our hearts slowly, one act of love at a time. If you believe that faith still works through ordinary people, if you believe that God can turn even the darkest storm into a new dawn, then share this story with someone who needs hope today. Comment Amen if you believe God is still working miracles in this world. Share this video to remind others that truth, courage, and kindness still matter. Subscribe for more stories of faith, redemption, and the unbreakable bond between man and his loyal friend. May the Lord bless and protect everyone watching this, and may His light guide you through every storm you face.